So it's hard for people to resonate. And then when we have young politicians coming out, they say things. I mean, because I do look at the media, social media, in the comments when we have Zoom meetings and stuff with members of public. They say, you are too young to go into politics. You're only 23, you're only 24. You don't know how the world works. But the way our world works now is very different from how it works then. And most of the people that are actually commenting, they're actually boomers. So it becomes our time, my generation, to actually educate boomers on how things work now.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And that's why we have you on this session. We all need to be educated in many ways. I suppose the voice of experience from the likes of Kirpal and Swee Yong, and the realities that you are facing, Andrea, and your generation. Yeah.
For an opposition party to receive around 40% or slightly more, 40% at almost all the areas that we contested in, or in total, I would see it as a good sign, because if in a year you can achieve this much, then when it comes to the next few years or the next election, we might achieve even more. So that was one of the results were disappointing, but I'm very heartened by it, because it shows that Singaporeans are more receptive towards change, especially the younger generation. Because
for the PSP, I think we should see it in another angle. Imagine if they won 2 GRCs and 2 SMCs. As a new party that is only just over a year old, you get in, you don't know what your strategy was, and in the midst of COVID, with your sort of little bit haphazard sort of campaigning, you managed to win, say, 10 seats. What is your winning formula? What were people happy with and what were people unhappy with? You wouldn't know, But now that you have lost all the seats, the introspection plus the refining of what you're going to do on the ground for the next 5 years, then in 2025, let's say you won 1 GRC, 1 SMC, and then you failed on another 3 GRCs. You will then know what worked well, what didn't work well.
Yeah,
I think the PSPs was quite an ambitious plan, and I think what it does show is that there's potential there, right? Given the numbers as well, so people are receptive to new players on the scene, right? Kirpal, what was the highlight for you?
I think the highlight was obviously the post-election announcement, as I made earlier, as I spoke about the leader of the opposition being now a formal position in our Singapore Parliament. I think that for many of us is at the moment just a token nod in the pathway to real democracy by the Prime Minister. But I think it's more than that, because the legal implications, the constitutional embodiments for that particular announcement are complex, they are many, and they are plural. That means they're coming from all over the place. And Singapore is by no stretch of the imagination a very easy independent country to govern, because we have far too many sensitive individuals who also want to take part. But many of us, I think, while being very sensitive and being very eager to engage, may not have, and I don't mean to be rude about this, but I think to be realistic, we may not have the wherewithal, because a real decision to cast a vote does require a number of knowledges, and I use the word knowledges in the plural because it requires some kind of sense of history. It requires a sense of the knowledge of the individuals that one is voting for or voting against. It requires what may be in the best interest of the country. And all three of these statements may not cohere in a harmonious kind of way. They may all be pulling in very different directions. And this could be a very, very challenging position.
Do you think there will be a cleaning of the pathways now in terms of trying to get more involvement, more engagement of the community in the policies? Because clearly the results have shown that when the parties listened to the members of the ward, they seem to get their support a bit more. Even
we go,
with the unusual situation where this was a virtual election almost.
correct. If we go by what the Prime Minister has announced, that he formally wants to institute the position of a leader of the opposition in the House, that I think is probably one of the best political decisions that has been voiced by a Prime Minister in Singapore in the last maybe 50 over years. And this gives credibility to the fact that from now on, I mean, if you follow the UK model, it doesn't really matter whether it's the Conservatives who win or the Labour that wins, because the real difference on the ground will probably not be more than 10%. Generally, the way forward to me seems positive. And a lot of people, while they be personally unhappy over the number and all of that, qualitatively, I think most people are happy that we are going forward in a wholesome kind of way.
I don't know. Well, the opposition leader is a good in terms of optics. It looks good for Singapore. Do people on the ground really care?
Actually, I think that it is good both ways, because what happens if in 2025 or 2030 that the total number of non-PAP MPs go higher than 50%.
Correct.
And therefore, PAP then has to take the leader of the opposition seat, right? So
Yep.
that is also in a way protecting their own turf. But whether we look at the Australian Parliament model or the UK Parliament model, I will only give cognizance to this positive note as wishful thinking for now, until I see what concrete actions, for example, disclosure of data by civil service to the leader of the opposition, what resources are going to be handed over to him to help him expand his capability to ask good questions in Parliament. So I'm not holding my breath for it. I just want to wait and watch it.
Sure.
Along with good questions, we also want good answers. So I don't
Correct.
know how that's going to shape up. Yeah?
There has been some rather odd statements that have been articulated, and this has lent credibility to the assumption by some individuals that really nobody has a very clear road forward, particularly in terms of our population capability, in terms of how many can we absorb comfortably, and also in terms of a consensus.
My biggest unhappiness, I would say, so many POFMA orders, and there were outright denials of information that were previously published, accusations of falsehoods, specific examples being that there is no population planning targets, as well as, for example, the POFMA for Professor Paul Tambaya, where he brought up a point about MOM serving notice on employers about sending their workers for tests. That was published in our own mainstream media, but yet he was POFMA for it. So these things made me query, where are the rules? Population planning targets have to be around, and that to me would be a basic rule, because every 5 years we do a master plan that requires you to plan ahead for a certain population to use your infrastructure, and every 10 years we develop a new concept plan. Concept plans are planned for the city to build itself up over a 30 to 50 year period. And without having any population targets, can you really plan to spend $100 billion on land transport infrastructure? So that to me, looking back for the last 2 weeks, these 2 points, POFMA and denial of prior information, were the biggest surprises.
In a very mature society, which is what we all hope for, all these complications may be handled in a harmonious way, meaning the aggravations are settled over a nice cup of coffee in a meeting room or behind closed doors. But people out there become quite irrational when matters of the heart become pronounced. You know, in the university, we always say, what I'm going to teach you is more from the head. Use your head. All the teachers very often say, right? Use your head. Okay, but very often the heart prevails more powerfully than the head does.
What are the chances of the PAP changing and adopting a more inclusive style of politics? I suppose it's up to them to look at that, but any thoughts on that from any of you?
In fact, that is what I wanted to say about the next part of our discussion, which is about looking forward. So there have been WhatsApp exchanges, Facebook exchanges about whether leopards can really change their spots. Now,
well, that was also the point raised in this one, so yeah.
Yes, the olive branch that was taken out to be given for leader of the opposition and all, those are good gestures, but again, they are merely verbal at this stage. So over the next 2 to 3 months, let's pay attention to what actions are coming out of the reflection and the soul searching, if any. So the first point that I would like to start to take stock of would be what's the lineup of the new cabinet, because we have a few retired ministers. We have also got a minister who was voted out. So what is the new cabinet lineup post-COVID? I mean, of course, and to handle the current ongoing COVID situation. After understanding how PM lines up his cabinet, we'll get an indication of where his focus might be. Let each new minister then announce what their policies might be. So that would be at least going to take 6 months before it unfolds, and then let's see the real concrete actions. After all, the winning party is called the People's Action Party. So let's look at the actions rather than just pay attention to the words.
Okay.
You don't want too many lightning strikes, because that's a symbol of vacancy as well.
Yeah, and talking about this on Storm Asia.
So,
yeah.
So it should be a bit stormy. We should be looking for lightning strikes, is it? Okay. Okay, there's another question. This one's for Andrea. As you are the youngest person in the panel, what were the key turning points for the younger citizens to look for change?
You need to actually look at the policies. You need to make the effort to look at the policies and schemes that each opposition party or every party push out. So when they push out certain schemes, I did receive feedback on how are they going to do it, but because most of the parties don't tell you how, they just tell you that they are going to do it. But the fact that political parties can actually push out policies and schemes, especially during an election, it shows that they probably went through many rounds of consideration or discussion before pushing this out. So rest assured that if a party pushes out a particular policy, even though that it may seem a bit unreal, like for instance, GST hikes, lower cost of living, or all these kind of stuff, you need to see which are the policies or which are the factors that affect you most. For me, because I'm in my, not say prime, but 25, so things I care, okay. I wouldn't say prime yet, but I would think of things like housing. Housing is definitely very important, especially in the future, because now one HDB flat already costs like so much costing. Just imagine in the future, and I'm not going to imagine the far future even. So if there's any way or any advice I will give, is to consider policies that you align with the most, or things that you believe that will affect you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there a tendency on the part of your generation that you follow what the others are saying? I mean, or do you seriously consider the facts for yourself, make up your own mind? How much peer group influence is there?
There is definitely going to be some influence. It depends it differs for different people. For me, I'm very firm with my decision. I wouldn't let anyone else affect me, because ultimately everybody's running their own race. So,
but do you research around the topic, or do you just make up your mind that you prefer pink color and then you reject all other shades, red, blue,
no,
green?
we do comparisons, even when it comes to, I think a lot of people my age. I'm not sure about the younger generation. I don't know whether I'm considered young, but I'm pretty sure people around my age would. I'm pretty sure people around my age do comparisons, even when it comes to buying, different things. You'll compare things like price, things like whether it is value, whether there is value and stuff. Similar for these kind of policies.
Yes, so you would compare a candidate with his party's election manifesto versus another candidate and their election manifesto that was released by the other party.
That's how for me, I don't look at candidate. I look at what the party pushes out and basically the party's value. Because if I were to look at candidate, there are, to be very frank, there are some candidates that I agree with that, you know, it may be from the opposition team, but there are some candidates from the PAP side that I agree with. So I mean, every political party, there's going to be people you agree and disagree with, but it just depends how you actually put it across.
There is also a question here by Joel Kam, who asked about whether role of mainstream media ought to be changed, alternative media sources and stuff. Here is something that I would like to suggest. As the entire team in the cabinet, perhaps one of their KPIs, one of their annual bonuses that they are paid for should be to lift our media index globally from the very low 170 or 150 position to up to the top 50 positions, for example. If these KPIs were set, then perhaps we would have a much more open media that is willing to allow a contestation of ideas and publish more widely and be able to differentiate what is real news, what is propaganda, and what is just airy-fairy stuff.
You know, but I think most of the time all these indexes come up, and if it's not important to the government, they don't care where you sit in their rank. So it would come down to the fact that I think people on the ground have to decide what they want to do, who they want to listen to. The mainstream media are there, but the other media is also coming up, social media.
Yeah, but with the use sources of POFMA now, even a very well-researched and educated analyst or a PhD person, they'll be thinking twice or three times before they will make their opinions heard.
True. I think we have, but then, you know, it's always good to be mindful of the facts before you jump in. That is probably a prerequisite anyway, but something we're oversensitive about some of these things. Kirpal, you've been through a fair few elections and you've seen the media scene change and you've seen governments change or the leadership change. What do you think is going to be the way forward? And a question from Sanjay about the 4G PMship, who's suited for that role?
I think there is a maturing that has taken place from the time I started voting many years ago, more than half a century ago, actually, roughly. But I think it's been a very slow process. And I remember what Mr. Lee Kuan Yew used to say. You know, he for some reason used to come to Bukit Timah campus when I was a student at the university and give us a good whacking, you know. And he would laugh sometimes, you know. He says, I'm open to be put in prison. So should you be if you want to enter politics. Politics is a dirty game. Politics is a game of power. The person who is in charge will take charge if he's got any guts. You know what I mean? And so he said, the best thing for you to do is do well in your studies so that the society around you respects you. And then when you enunciate and articulate your views, that you'll have already some ground support. And then to work hard. He said, you know, governments that are elected in a democratic manner have got no time for foolishness or fun very much. And this is why he said, even my wife sometimes has told me, you know, don't play politics too much. So I think it's a real serious issue of maturation. In terms of going forward, the realization that we are a small nation, and no matter how we say we punch above our weight, at the end of the day, we do remain a small nation. Sometimes a bigger government, bigger population, more to win or lose. If a certain person makes a statement coming from, you know, a ground support of 10 million, and another one is making a point coming from a ground support of 10,000, I mean, it'd be unwise. I'm not saying it'd be foolish, but it'd be unwise to immediately support the 10,000 unless the 10,000 is, supremely and universally sort of respected. So I think we have to think of statement, consequence, taking the greater society. Sometimes a little bit of patience. They say the mother of all virtues is patience, and they say patience is its own good virtue. I think there is some sense in it, and we can't be in a hurry.
Okay, but some of those sayings about virtue and patience came about at a time when there was time.
Yeah.
Now it's a lot more intense. Things are moving
Correct.
a lot faster. We may not have the patience to wait and see what is the best solution. By which time you decide, it might be way past you, way ahead of you, and you're unable to catch up, right? So given the current context, what are we looking at in terms of the fixes that we need to implement in society? I think immediately now, since so much money has been put forth as rescue packages for the COVID, I suspect taxes are going to go up, charges for various things are going to go up. Is that something that society can tolerate?
You're talking about increasing of GST. This is, I personally felt that, Singapore always brags that it is a first world country and all this kind of stuff. But what's the point of bragging if behind the scenes there are actually people that can't afford, living, having such a lifestyle, even if it's a very if it's a very ordinary lifestyle. We're not even talking about high those that spend a lot, but people that generally need help. So if you can't even answer, or if the government can't even help these people, then wouldn't increasing taxes be a question? Because ultimately, what is a country without its people, right? There's no point bragging that. There's no point bragging that saying that Singapore has a first class education, Singapore has a first class or world healthcare system when some of their people can't even afford healthcare.
Yes, so that's another KPI we should give to the cabinet, which is to lift the bottom 30% of household income up by, let's say, 50%. And if they can achieve that target, let's give them a very generous bonus of doubling their salaries.
Really?
Yeah, why not? If our bottom
we can
30%,
double it, and the double portion will be a contribution to charity, maybe to help the less fortunate.
that would be even better. Yes.
Correct.
Do you think, Andrea, do you think that politicians are paid too much? Ministers are paid too much?
Of course. I personally feel that when you do politics, right, you don't do it for money, but you do it from the heart. And especially when you think of, you talk about this election, how certain candidates of certain political parties are strategically placed. And it's like I just give PSP for example. Okay, based on my understanding and what I know, we push candidates from various walks of life. This is to show that we are inclusive of, because how can you understand people? How can you understand Singaporeans if you were already born with it? If you all understand what I mean. If you already had the path set for you already. Whereas there are people that literally built their political career from the ground up. I'm talking about certain PSP candidates, certain Workers' Party candidates. Of course, they have credentials and stuff, but they do not have any relations or anything to do with the government or any stuff. This is why I feel that when it comes to being a politician, you need to know your people first, and in order for you to know your people, you need to already be part of the community instead of waiting for election and then you just go for walkabouts and stuff. I'll give you one example. So one example was that because I stay around the Tanjong Pagar area, so suddenly a few weeks before election, or like the months leading up to election, suddenly there was this paper pasted on the HDB blocks that say our 5-year Tanjong Pagar as well as a real HDB plan, which I have never seen in the entire 10 years I've lived there. I'm just wondering if this is a stunt, you know.
Oh,
And-
so
and-
in addition to an East Coast plan, there is a Tanjong Pagar plan.
There was a literal paper that has a QR code and say, please look at our Tanjong Pagar plan.
Did you
housing
scan
plan."
that? Did you
I
check
scanned,
out
but
the?
I mean, it's just a
What did you see?
website. It's just a website of how a particular party is, you know, what they are doing and stuff. Because in the first place,
Was
I
there
don't
a
even know
plan
who-
at least?
There's a Singapore Together We Care
We have a
Tanjong
plan.
Yeah.
Pagar plan. Yeah.
Yeah, so to me, in fact, I don't even know who my MP was for Tanjong Pagar until, you know, until only in the recent years, until this election came about. And I was like, oh, but I never even see her in my estate. So it's very hard for people to understand, because what people want from politicians or people that are actually serving the government, they want understanding, they want empathy. These are very key factors that people look out for, because how can you say that you understand me if you are not even in my shoes, or if you didn't even belong to the hood when you were already born in probably a landed property
Privilege.
somewhere up in Upper Bukit Timah, you know?
Yeah.
It is very contradicting and a bit of hypocritical, I would feel.
What would you like to see taking place in 5 years?
I think within the next 5 years, and I hope it is sorted out by the next time the election comes around, it will be that the HDB's decaying leases, against a backdrop of a very rapidly aging population who's passing away, meant that the families and the beneficiaries will be selling away their old flats to encash the old flats to split the money amongst the beneficiaries. That pressure added on to the decaying 99-year lease would actually be dampening HDB resale values quite a bit. And we can't wait until the 2030 election already. By 2025, we need to have solid, concrete plans ahead for how this would be settled.
Yes, I was quite surprised that wasn't as much of an issue this election.
Yes, because there were some other mudslinging going on that took center stage.
Okay, Andrea, what
What
do
I would
you
like to see?
what would you like to see taking place in the next 5 years?
I would like a more solution-led approach, you know, that is driven more from the ground, like more bottom-up solutions instead of top-down. Because right now, all our solutions are mainly top-down. As long as the parliament think that it works, then it should work for the people. But the fact that we are actually having this discussion, or the fact that there was actually a political debate going on, all those kind of stuff, it just shows that it does not, just because the parliament thinks it works this way and it passed certain policies that work, that they think will work for the people, it doesn't mean that it works. So all those best practices imposed by the parliament should be really best practices, because I really do hope they actually take this into consideration, because I really do hope they go and walk around more and understand the people more, and also basically come up with solutions that would both benefit the country as well as the people, without denying a certain party, which is going to be hard, because you can't have the best of both worlds most of the time. So in terms of this kind of situation, I think you should think of ways on how you can compromise between the people as well as what is best for the country. And also in terms of social media, it's just going to be way worse. I mean, this election was already a big example, a great example of how the damage, or even how well social media can be, perceived. For instance, I have people digging up politicians' resumes, stalk them, see whether they are worthy of being in parliament, what have they said 10 years ago, those kind of stuff.
The social media also
shouldn't be happening, because the fact that a particular party push out a candidate, it can be, they probably did, many rounds of interviews and stuff, just because a person said something, 10 years ago when they were probably younger then and maybe not as mature as they would like to be, doesn't mean that they are the same person now. I mean, that's my take on it. If not, everybody is not going to be a politician anymore.
Yeah. Okay, quickly, Kirpal, what
Yes,
are your thoughts?
two very quick points. One, I think it is time that we seriously think of reducing the voting age to 18 to be more consistent with the rest of the world, and also more consistent with the grand achievement of our educational system. I think we are one of the best in the world, ranked by anybody from any country. And one of the indices of a good educational system is that the people who graduate have got good heads. They can think for themselves. And if that is true, then that should be important, the reduction to the age of 18 for voting rights. And number two, I think possibly a more robust discussion of broadly political issues, starting with pre-university classes. The pre-university offers a wonderful opportunity in the GP class, right, to discuss current affairs, current topics and all that. So that side by side, in terms of, say, reducing the voting age and making people more politically savvy, there are also classes that help to expand and realize these objectives of a more mature political ground where the opposing fighting parties fight, but not to kill each other, but to try and arrive at the best decision possible for the nation. Yeah.
Okay.
Kanan, I would like
Andrea,
to add one last part.
Sure.
I want to say that oppositions don't oppose for the sake of opposing. And I would like to implore more younger generation to actually join politics, because ultimately, as much as boring, some people would say it's boring and it's very white, black or white matter. These are things that will affect us ultimately in the future. We may not see it now, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't affect the future. So if you have time, participate in more politics related activities, do more social work to understand how our society works now. Who are the people that needs help and stuff. Then you have a better understanding of why policies impact certain groups of people and why you should be concerned. Because right now our generation is, we are just trying to earn more money because we know that the cost of living is only going to go higher. So yeah.
Cool. Swee Yong, Andrea, Kirpal, thank you so much for being in this discussion. I think a lot of wonderful points have been raised, a lot of great insights into the last election. And clearly, I think the road ahead is going to be a challenging one. Let's see how the new parliament tackles some of these. It'll be wonderful also to have the younger generation get more involved in politics. I think it's quite important for the future of the country. It's, I think the one main thing you should realize is that politics affects you in all aspects of your life. There's no escaping it. So you may think it's boring, it's dull, but it still affects you. So you might as well get invested in it and make the most of it. So thank you for this being on this web chat, Wednesday web chat with Storm Asia. And look forward to the next one. Just check out the site stormasia.com for what our next discussion will be next Wednesday. Thank you.